That thing where you wake up at 3 a.m, lie there, brain's going. You're not anxious, you're not in pain, you just can't get back to sleep. And you've been told it's stress or hormones or just getting older. For a lot of people, that's probably right. But one thing I don't see talked about much, and it showed up clearly in my own data, is the cortisol and blood sugar angle. And once I started tracking it, the belly connection made a lot more sense. I tracked my sleep against my hunger and cravings data for 10 weeks during the 70-day rhythm reset, and the pattern was pretty hard to argue with. 4 hours sleep, not unusual for a lot of people, and the next day my brain was demanding simple carbohydrates, crisps, chocolate, whatever was in the cupboard. Not because I had no willpower, because my ghrelin, the hunger hormone, had spiked and my leptin, the satiety signal, had dropped. Biology, not character. And that connects to why the belly doesn't shift no matter how well you eat. The cortisol driving that 3 o'clock wake is one of the things telling your body to hold fat, specifically around your middle. Dr. Jason Fung, Toronto nephrologist, writes a lot about fasting and metabolic health. He explains the cortisol awakening response and why blood sugar instability peaks between 2 and 4 a.m. That piece goes in the body of the video, but the data I'm going to show you, this is mine. Right, so let me tell you what I was actually experiencing. I'd been asleep, proper asleep, no particular reason to wake, and somewhere between 2 and 4, I'd just surfaced. Not bolt upright, not anxious, just lying there with my eyes open and a brain that had apparently decided the night was over. Wide awake for an hour, sometimes longer. Then eventually drift off again, then the alarm. And for a while, a decent while if I'm honest, I filed it under just one of those things. Getting older, too much on my mind. Maybe the room was too warm. The classic response when you don't know what else to blame. Here's what I wasn't doing. I wasn't connecting it to the day that followed, because the day that followed had its own story and I wasn't reading them as the same chapter. Day after a bad night, 4 hours, 5 hours, broken. I'd be fine in the morning, then around 10, 11 o'clock, something would shift. Energy didn't crash exactly, it just got sticky. And the hunger that arrived wasn't normal hunger. Normal hunger, I can ride out for hours. This was different, specific, brain going, crisps, chocolate, something sweet, something salty, something now. And it didn't matter that I'd eaten properly the evening before. The demand was there regardless. I put it down to tiredness. Obvious really. You're tired, you reach quick energy, fair enough. But I kept tracking and the pattern kept showing up. Poor sleep, specific craving the following day, disrupted night, 3 o'clock wide awake, worse cravings than just a short night. And underneath all of it, this thing I hadn't named, a belly that would not shift, no matter what I did in the eating window. That's the puzzle. And it turns out the 3 a.m. wake and the belly and the cravings are not 3 separate problems. They're the same mechanism wearing 3 different faces. Day 6 of the 21-day fast back in June 25. It's in my evidence log, 6 hours sleep, broken, wide awake for roughly an hour in the middle of the night. For context, during an extended fast, I'd normally sleep reasonably well by that point. Day 6 should have been relatively settled. The unusual bit wasn't the total hours, it was the waking, just surfacing, no reason, lying there. What I noticed at the time, adrenaline and cortisol adapting, body adjusting. I wasn't alarmed by it. What I didn't do, not yet, was pull the thread to see where it led. The thread was there, I just hadn't pulled it. Now come forward to day 25 of the 70-day rhythm reset, November 25. 4 hours sleep, 4 nights running. Not one bad night, 4 consecutive nights at 4 to 5 hours. Hospital appointment that got cancelled. Walked 3.5 hours to kill the time. Came home exhausted, fed up, and then full tub of Millionaire shortbread. 2,000 calories gone. I wasn't hungry. That's the important bit. I was fried, and that's different. Hunger has a rhythm to it. It comes in waves. You ride it out. It passes. This wasn't that. This was something else entirely. Brain demanding the fastest dopamine hit it could find. And I didn't have the resource to argue with it. I logged it as data, not failure data. And when I looked at what 4 nights of compounded poor sleep had done, the mechanism started making sense. Because poor sleep doesn't just make you tired, it does something specific to cortisol. Dr. Jason Fung, nephrologist, intensive dietary management program, he put it directly. A single night of sleep deprivation increases cortisol levels by more than 100%. One night, not a week, one. Now, most people know cortisol is a stress hormone, and it is, but it's also a fat storage signal, specifically around the abdomen. Cortisol tells the body, we're in a threat state, store energy centrally, hold the reserves. This is why the phrase, how to reduce cortisol belly fat, lands for so many people. The belly isn't the cause, it's the evidence. Cortisol was there first. And here's where the 3 a.m. wake connects. Cortisol naturally rises in the early hours. That's normal. It's part of what's supposed to get you up and moving by 7 o'clock. The cortisol awakening response is a real thing. The problem is when it fires too high, too early. Blood sugar instability in the night, particularly between 2 and 4, can spike cortisol prematurely. And when cortisol spikes at 3 o'clock in the morning, it does two things. It wakes you up and it tells your body to start preparing for a threat that it doesn't actually face. This is the mechanism. Your body isn't broken. It's doing exactly what chronic low-level stress and blood sugar instability have told it to do. The 3 a.m. wake isn't a sleep problem. It's a nervous system problem wearing a sleep mask. Here's the analogy that finally made this click for me. Your nervous system has two modes. Sympathetic, foot on the accelerator, heart rate up, breathing shallow, muscles tense, digestion offline, ready to run or fight. Parasympathetic, foot on the brake, heart rate down, breathing deep, muscles relaxed, repair mode active. Most of us in modern life have been flooring the accelerator for years. Stress, deadlines, screens, caffeine, late nights, 4-hour sleep weeks. The accelerator, permanently. And the problem is your body can't distinguish between running from something and lying in a bed worrying about a work email. To the nervous system, stress is stress. Cortisol fires the same way. You've been in this state, tired but wired, for so long that the 3 a.m. wake feels normal. It isn't normal. It's your alarm system misfiring on a schedule. The data I was tracking across the rhythm reset made this visible in a way I couldn't unsee. The nights with 5-hour plus, even if broken, the next day was manageable. The nights at 4 hours or below, the craving pattern was reliable and specific. High carb, high sugar, immediate, not a preference, a biological instruction. And the belly piece, I've been doing the eating window work. Genuinely good quality food, sensible fasting windows. The plants, the fibre and the waste measurement was sticky. Not going backwards, but not moving the way other markers were moving. And what I eventually understood, not all at once, gradually, is that you cannot out-eat elevated cortisol. The body has a hierarchy of instructions. When cortisol is chronically raised, fat storage around the middle is one of them. The eating window helps, but if the cortisol signal is still running in the background, the belly responds to that signal, not just to what you ate. I'm 53. I was on 6 medications and I'm now on none. I didn't read about this and decide to make videos. I did it, tracked it, got the blood test to prove it, and then made the videos. If you'd rather follow someone with receipts than someone with opinions, subscribe. New videos every Monday, Wednesday and Friday. The moment it properly landed wasn't dramatic. I want to be honest about that. I was lying awake, 3 a.m. funny enough, and I wasn't anxious. I wasn't in pain. I was just awake. Brain going over things, work things mostly, and I thought, this is the exact experience I've been tracking. This is it happening. Instead of fighting it or spiraling, I just noted it. This is the nervous system. This is cortisol doing what cortisol does when it's been running too hot for too long. I think a Zoe podcast sent me down the research path. I can't tell you which one. Genuinely, it was one of those, that's interesting, let me look further moments, rather than a specific revelation. But the cortisol blood sugar early morning waking connection, once I had it, I couldn't unhave it. The honest thing to say about what changed is not enough. Right now, filming this, I've had 5 nights in a row with no more than 5 hours. Work pressure, late screens, head won't switch off, the full set. So I'm not standing here telling you I've solved this. I'm telling you I know what the mechanism is, I know what makes it worse, and I know from previous stretches where I got this right. The early morning walks with proper sunlight are one of the most reliable things I've found for resetting it. I plan to start that again tomorrow, not as a hack, as putting the brakes back on. Because that's what this is. In practice, the way you calm how to reduce cortisol naturally isn't complicated. It's not a supplement or a protocol. It's resetting the nervous system baseline, getting it out of permanent accelerator mode and remembering where the brake pedal is. Morning light anchors the cortisol pulse properly. It sets the daily clock. When that's working correctly, cortisol peaks at the right time in the morning, drops through the day, and crucially doesn't spike at 3 in the morning because the whole rhythm is calibrated. Sleep is upstream of almost everything else in this system, which is uncomfortable to admit when you're not sleeping well. But that's what the data shows. And here's the n=1 caveat, because it matters. This is my pattern, my cortisol, my blood sugar, my nervous system. In my case, they seem to connect quite directly. I can't say it would look identical for everyone. What I can say is the mechanism is real. The biology is documented, and it shows up in my tracking consistently enough that I stopped treating the 3 a.m. wake as a sleep problem and started treating it as a nervous system signal. That's the shift. What I'd do differently. I'd have taken the early morning walk seriously, much sooner, not as exercise, as a cortisol reset. There were stretches across the last 2 years where I was consistent with it. Out before 8 o'clock, proper daylight on the face, not just a few minutes, and the sleep quality in those periods was noticeably different. I kept treating it as optional, weather dependent, something to do when I had time. I'd treat it as non-negotiable now, but I haven't done the last week. It's about 10 minutes of morning light, not a 2-hour hike. The consistency though, it does matter more than the duration. What to watch out for if you're already tracking. If you're monitoring your data and you notice that poor sleep nights correlate reliably with elevated hunger and specific cravings the following day, not random hunger, but the specific demands for carbohydrates or sugar, that's worth flagging. In my case, it was a reliable pattern, not a coincidence. If I were looking at my own data and seeing that consistently, I'd want to ask, what's my cortisol doing overnight? And what's my blood sugar doing between 2 and 4 a.m? Those two questions reframe the whole thing. This is the one I want to say carefully because I think it matters for people who haven't been given a diagnosis yet. If you've been waking up in the night, not every night, but regularly for no obvious reason, and the days after are harder to manage than they should be, more craving, more tiredness, a belly that doesn't respond to what you're doing with food, it might be worth thinking about how to reduce cortisol belly fat, not as a cosmetic problem, but as a nervous system signal. The pattern in my data started years before anything became clinical. Cortisol elevation, blood sugar instability, disrupted sleep. This tends to develop slowly. Bodies start doing this long before a GP has a name for it. The 3 a.m. wake is often the first readable signal. That's worth knowing. It's not a diagnosis, it's just something to be curious about. And if you're tired but wired most of the time, and that phrase probably rings a bell for more people than I realise, the cortisol piece is worth looking at. If you want to start tracking your own sleep and hunger patterns, the simple version, not the complicated version, there's a tracker template in the description below. It's the same basic format I use to spot these patterns in my own data. Free link below. One thing I need to say clearly, this is educational content only, not medical advice. Speak to your GP before changing your fasting pattern, diet or medication. Next Monday, different pattern, same detective process. I'll see you then.